Hey everyone, it's Kristan Hawkins, and welcome to this new episode of Explicitly Pro-Life. Today we're going to talk about pro-life atheists and what the hell is going on in California, and it's not good news. All right, so today I have a special guest with me. Special guest, introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, it's me, Terrisa Bukovinac, the founder and executive director of Pro-Life San Francisco. We're a millennial-led grassroots activist organization operating in arguably the most pro-choice culture in the world.
And Teresa is your just friendly neighborhood atheist. So before we talk about everything happening in California, and there's a lot, and Teresa's been kind of on the front lines there in San Francisco because all this bad stuff is originating in California. Thank goodness she's there. We have a lot to talk about on that. But I want you to kind of tell folks like how you got started in the pro-life movement, because you're a Democrat, you're atheist, you're vegan. Those are your monikers, right? You always tell people.
Yeah, exactly.
So how the heck did you come to the pro-life movement?
Well, I was raised religious, and I was very active in my church in my early adulthood. But my church was pretty pro-choice. So I just kind of maintain this idea that babies go to heaven when they die, and that, there's a God that's going to right all the wrongs in the end. So I thought, abortion's probably wrong, but on the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just pray about it and God will fix it. But when I lost my faith later in life, everything changed.
There's so much wrong with that.
Of course there is.
Okay,
in retrospect, it makes no sense. But I think that it's important to talk about, because I think a lot of pro-choice Christians probably felt the way I did.
There actually are. I've actually met evangelical Christians who kind of are like, well, I know abortion's wrong, it's murder, but the babies go to heaven anyway, so heaven's a better place than earth. And I'm like,
well, and you kind of compare it to the other things that you know are definitely murder, like children are starving in third world countries. And as a Christian at the time, I thought, well, I'm not really doing anything about that. So why would I get involved in something that I'm not even really that sure about morally? And that it just really wasn't majorly on my radar until I didn't believe in God anymore, and I didn't believe in a life after death, and that shook my system completely. It made me rethink my moral compass entirely, and what is right and wrong and why. And it made me think about abortion again, because I realized that my own life wasn't necessarily, from my new perspective, I didn't think of my life as, this is being willed by God. God has a purpose for my life, and that's why I'm here. I saw it as like, I'm here because nobody interrupted my life cycle and killed me. And it became much more urgent.
Because you have one life.
Yeah, you get one life, and nobody's fixing it in the end, so I have to fix it now. And then I was overcome with all these feelings about it, but I didn't know where to put it, because where does a pro-life atheist go? Where does someone who's very left-leaning politically and ideologically go if they're pro-life? So I basically kept it under wraps for a few years until a girl, her name's Monica Snyder. She was one of my employees at one of the businesses that I managed years ago, and we had both moved on in our careers. We weren't working there anymore, but we had stayed friends on Facebook, and I saw her posting one day on secular pro-life, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's me. I'm a secular pro-life person. And so I started getting involved on the page, and then before long, it's like, oh, can you help with this? Can you help with this? And then once you start helping, as you know, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, and I can help. Yeah, and then it's like, oh, now this is my job, so I'm here to just yell at everyone about abortion until it's gone.
Believe, behave. That's kind of our methodology at Students for Life of it's belong, believe, behave. And once you get sucked in, baby, we're gonna keep bringing you in, doing more in the pro-life movement. One of the things, I know I want to move on to California because we have a lot to talk about, but one of the things that always kind of interests me about pro-life atheism, those who are atheists or agnostic. I'm obviously not an atheist or agnostic, but why is it so important? Like, where is your grounding of knowing that killing human beings is wrong? Where does that come from as an atheist? Because, like, as a Christian, I know killing human beings is wrong because human beings are created in the image of God, and we're all equally valuable in his eyes. So therefore, killing any human being unjustly is wrong. It's taking of a human life, of a being that was created in God's image. And I've had interesting conversations with pro-choice atheists on campuses who kind of argue, well, all life is equally valuable. I had one conversation one time at University of New Mexico where the kid was telling me that the life of the cockroach was as valuable as the life of the human fetus. And I was like, so like you're a mass murderer, like, and when you drive and kill a bunch of bugs, like, should you be in jail? And so I've always like, where is your grounding for why it's wrong? Because like, why is it wrong?
Yeah, this is like a super common question, particularly from Christians.
Okay, sorry.
It's a question that almost no one else would ask, but I totally understand the curiosity around it. For most atheists, this is not an issue because atheists come at this from all different kinds of perspectives. We just have already arrived at the idea that human rights is a thing, so there isn't like a monolithic way that atheists would interpret this. For me personally, it's just a consistent application of the human rights that we've already established. I could go into deep philosophical reasons about why I think that should be the case or how we've evolved to get to this point where this is evolutionarily beneficial to us. But I think the bottom line is just that as a culture, as a globe, we generally recognize that prematurely taking someone's life before they've had a chance to live it and without their consent is wrong. And
as part of the kind of the moral conduct, right?
Exactly.
Code of conduct.
It's something that we understand culturally, and people are coming at that from lots of different religious perspectives, ideologies, atheism, agnosticism, and the like. But we all kind of agree that these things are standard things for creating a great society. We don't want to live in a world where we're discriminated against and we are threatened with violence. And so it's a consistent application of that value.
Is that why you're a vegan?
Yeah, that's definitely why I'm vegan. I was moved by the suffering that animals experience in confinement and through slaughter. That's why I also advocate for telling the truth about abortion and showing the images when it's appropriate, because those kinds of things do help people to connect with the violence emotionally and help them to make choices and decisions that maybe aren't popular, that a lot of people that will, like, I get made fun of for being vegan all the time. People think it's hilarious. And it's a pretty minority position. But that doesn't mean that the values are incorrect.
Well, Democrats had their way to ban meat and hamburgers.
Well, so. I don't think so. I work...
Cory Booker.
I work a lot.
They already took away all my plastic straws, Teresa.
Okay, well, it's actually quite difficult to get animal rights legislation passed even amongst Democrats. So I think that there's an impression that they're just only care about animals and don't care about fetuses.
I'm just saying, if you care about your plastic straws and hamburgers, there's one party you shouldn't vote for.
You should never eat a hamburger. It's wrong.
So good.
But in California, there are a lot of interesting things happening that kind of correlate between the animal rights movement and...
That's what we were talking about. That was... Yeah.
Right to know legislation is very popular. And I think that there is an increased sensitivity to the suffering of animals, and I believe that this is going to benefit us, because it is veganism and the animal rights movement that really gave me the courage to become a pro-life activist.
So you became a pro-life activist after you became vegan?
Yes, I got involved in animal rights activism first, and that's what kind of emboldened me to go out into the streets and advocate on behalf of the preborn.
Do you see animals as persons? Do you think animals are persons, and do you think they have the same rights? Because there's some vegans say that animals are persons. I mean, you've got Peter Singer, right?
Yeah.
Flosser, who actually argues that, more developed animals have more personhood rights, should have more personhood rights than infants. Do you equate human beings on the same scale, same level with animals?
Well, it's a complicated question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't prepare for it. I said, let's just talk about atheism. Sorry, right. These questions are popping into my head. Sorry.
I would say that abortion is wrong for different reasons, I think, sometimes than killing an animal that has consciousness. Killing an animal that is conscious and can experience fear and pain and emotional distress when separated from their families, and their family feels emotional anguish over the loss of their family member. That's very problematic for me in a way that like first trimester abortion isn't. However, I think it makes perfect sense to prioritize our own species. Like, we are more closely related to each other.
So you are a speciesist,
Well,
as
I
Peter
think-
Singer says we all are, right?
If Peter Singer has said that, then yes, I agree with that statement, because I think at the end of the day, even vegans, a lot of vegans don't care about insects. Not that they don't care, but they're not going to prioritize it in the same way like a suffering cow, they would a suffering cow. So I think, yes, ultimately we do have to rely on some type of speciesism, but we have to expand, well, we don't have to, but my suggestion is that we should expand those rights to all creatures that have the inherent ability to experience pain and suffering, and who can experience joy and a cognitive experience in life.
Interesting. Okay, we could go further, but I'm not, because we have talked a lot about what's happening in
I don't want to
California.
ruin everyone's day yet.
No, I think this is a fascinating discussion. I think, like I said, I think you may think that people get angry, but I actually think people appreciate hearing a different perspective. And I certainly appreciate hearing like how somebody else who's so totally different than I am in so many regards has arrived at the same conclusion and can fight, arm in arm with me to end abortion. I think that's a real strength of our movement. In fact, I think that's something, we've talked about this before. We actually need more diversity in our movement, because that's one of the things that I think, unfortunately, our movement gets a bad rap, because we have a tarnished brand in a lot of ways. And people, the Belong, Believe, Behave I mentioned, there's so many more people that should be a part of our movement, who should be voting with us, who should be fighting with us, but won't, because they won't take that first step to even identify as pro-life because of this brand of who they think we are.
Stigma.
It's terrible. So and that's why I'm glad you're like at the perfect place to do, God has called you to do this in San Francisco. You're like,
something's calling me.
but anyway, so
or I got bullied into it.
There
One
you
or
go.
the other.
There you go. But okay, so let's talk about everything going on in California. I bump into you all the time when I'm out here. We've been fighting this SB 320. Now it's SB 24, this abortion campus bill. You've been in Sacramento a lot testifying. You've gone with our Students for Life groups to the universities, and we've done protests, and we've taken toilet bowls on college campuses, toilet seats. That's one of the things about being like a David and the David and Goliath fight. If Davids are willing to think outside the box, have you ever read the Malcolm Gladwell book on David versus Goliath? You should read it. It's really cool. Okay. But it's about how like Davids can actually win. And historically, you tend to think of the David versus Goliath fight that it's 1,000,000 to 1 shot, but really Davids can win, but they have to fight like Davids.
Yeah.
And one of the things that successful Davids do is they think outside the box, and they're willing to be made fun of and be mocked. And we've certainly done that in California at the toilet bowls and toilet seats. And I have the pictures for our regional coordinators to prove. They're like, here's the toilet bowl I just picked up at Lowe's. But so you've been with us through all that. That's getting ready to get signed into law. By the time this airs, it might have been signed into law. Who knows? Because it can happen at any moment. So we have that going on in California, which is horrendous, because they want to export this campus abortion bill across country and fundamentally change the abortion industry. So you don't have to go to a brick and mortar abortion facility. You just go to your campus health center. But there's 2 other big things happening I want you to talk about specifically today. One, the trial of David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt. So David is the founder of Center for Medical Progress. He's the one who went undercover, embedded themselves, him and Sandra and some others, embedded themselves in the abortion industry and got Planned Parenthood and others on record admitting that they were selling the body parts of children they were aborting and actually altering the abortion procedures. And in some cases, we think performing, live dissection on these children to get more viable organs. But the state of California Kamala Harris, when she was Attorney General, colluded, we know, with Planned Parenthood and came after David. And so he's facing criminal charges as well as civil charges. Can you tell us what kind of, I think some people know about David, they know about CMP, but that was 2015 and we're moving on. But I think it's hard for a lot of people to kind of keep track of everything that's going on, because this is a real battle that's being fought like right now. Can you kind of give a summary to us of what's David facing and what's kind of happening?
Sure. So obviously David has done the most important work in the pro-life movement in our generation, and probably since Roe versus Wade. And yes, while a lot of this research took place years ago and the videos were released back in 2015, what he's facing still continues. And the effort to keep this ongoing is intentional by our opposition to encourage the public to forget about what has happened. Pro-Life San Francisco has been supporting David and Sandra in criminal court and
You've been
civil
there
court.
at the courthouse.
Yes, for almost 3 years now, it seems. And I met David back in October of 2016, and I believe it was right after that the criminal charges were filed.
So he's facing felony charges here in California for illegally videotaping, they're saying.
That's correct.
And then he has civil charges because they're mad that they lost money.
I think the charges are fraud, trespassing. I can't remember the other counts, but things like that. Basically, Planned Parenthood is saying that they had to increase security because of the videos, and therefore they want David and his legal teams to pay for that. The civil hearing is
that's in October, right?
October 2nd. That is going to be a jury trial with Judge William Orrick III, who is notorious. He is.
How is he not?
Yeah, we have tried to get him thrown off his case so many
his wife
times.
was on the board of Planned Parenthood. It was
He himself served on the board of the Good Samaritan Family Resource Center, which still operates in San Francisco today with a Planned Parenthood inside. The decision to put a Planned Parenthood in that facility was made while he was on the board.
Oh my gosh.
And we did obtain the bylaws of the organization, which show Judge Orrick still has continuing ongoing duties to protect the organization. And it's really just
How has he not recused himself?
Exactly.
You would think even his pro-abortion comrades would say, dude, you need to recuse yourself because they're going to use this to, whatever the verdict is, to go against the verdict.
Right. It's really unbelievable. And you may or may not be aware that the FBI is currently doing an investigation into David's findings in California. So while all this is going on, and while the abortion industry is prosecuting David and trying to make a criminal out of him, these potential charges against them, indictments, could be looming over them at any time.
Yeah, DOJ's been investigating since President Trump.
December 2017,
yeah,
I believe.
That's true, yeah. And we still, this is something we've been telling pro-life advocates, you need to keep calling and putting pressure on the Trump administration. Where is the DOJ investigation? Because the challenge is a lot of these, what I've been told from folks in DC is that there's a lot of Obama holdouts who are still working at DOJ, so they're slowing stuff down. So what's going on? So the criminal trial, it was just the beginning of it.
It's a preliminary hearing. So the judge in that case,
that happened this past week.
It was the last 2 weeks and 3 days. This is the first time that the does, or the accusers of David, those who are accusing him of illegally recording them, were called to testify under oath in front of the judge. And the judge is going to make a determination at the end within about a week in terms of whether or not this hearing is going to move forward to a jury trial, which is what we do not want.
It's 8 felony charges, right? There was 9 and one was dropped or something?
14 felony charges of illegal recording and 1 felony count of conspiracy to illegally record. What
did you notice? There were some shocking things. You've been sending out daily updates, thank you, of what's going on. What were some of the big top takeaways you think from this preliminary hearing?
Well, first, the does were very, very defensive. Many of them broke down on the stand.
Are these like abortionists?
Abortionists, yes. Doe 9, who was a top level person with Planned Parenthood. She
lived down here.
She lives down here. Yeah, she might like wine and salad. I don't know. You might know who I'm talking about. She was very defensive on the stand.
Yeah, because ruined her career essentially.
Well, it's hard to know what I'm actually allowed to say because the transcripts are going to be released, but they haven't yet. But I will just say that she was very defensive, and she said that she didn't care about the videos being released in her deposition, but then ended up saying under oath that she did care. So she was kind of changing her story in terms of that, but it just seemed really clear to the judge that she wasn't being forthcoming and that she was being hostile about the questioning. So I missed some of the testimony from some of the other abortionists, but I know that the STEM Express CEO, who is also one of the does, admitted to selling beating hearts to Stanford.
Beating hearts.
Beating hearts. So as the hearing goes on, though, David eventually takes the stand, and his attorneys lay out a very clear defense showing how David clearly planned out every step as a journalist, did research beforehand, talked to a ton of experts, talked to no less than 3 legal firms about the California recording law to ensure that he wasn't in violation of it, and made sure that he filmed only in public places.
That's right.
He only went to the private clinics in states where they didn't have a two-party consent. They painted a very clear picture. And it was really, I've known David a long time. He's a friend of mine, and I've been supporting him all these years. But hearing him to discuss exactly how this was planned out was incredibly impressive. You would just be floored if you heard in his own words and through the questioning of the defense how he's actually gotten this work done. And then later in the trial, there was an abortionist that actually testified to
the defense got so David's legal team got an abortionist to go on record
and defend David. And some of the things that he talked about under oath were just really incredible.
Why was he motivated to defend David? Just because of the gruesomeness of what we know is they're doing live dissection? Like, did he actually care?
Originally, he intended to meet David to tell him off and to confront him. He thought that David was misrepresenting. But when David showed him the evidence of what the does were saying, he was compelled because he knew that the amount of misoprostol that softens the cervix to do the abortion in a late-term abortion, the amount that they were using would have induced a birth early on. And he said that he's done roughly 30,000 abortions in his life, and he said that he knows that after the fetus is given the digoxin to cause fetal demise,
cardiac arrest, causes a heart attack,
it takes 7 to 8 minutes before the heart stops having activity before he will complete the abortion. And he said that if they're using this much misoprostol to induce labor, that they're definitely having born alive infants. He testified to that under oath. And something else.
What was the reaction in the courtroom when he said that?
Well, I think that I should also say that the courtroom is packed with David supporters, and there are absolutely no pro-choice supporters there. There haven't been in the last several years. They don't come out. The abortion industry does not want a spotlight on this. And that's another thing that seems really
surprising
apparent.
that they're actually following through this lawsuit, because now they all have to, you don't depositions, and they're all going to be under oath. And we're going to be able to ask, and David's legal team is going to be able to ask a lot of questions about Planned Parenthood and these abortion industries, how they operate. You would think because of discovery, they just wouldn't want to bother.
Well, honestly, they really, from my perspective, didn't even try to make a case that David had violated any laws. That's the most surprising part of the entire hearing.
It's the state. You think it's just the state bringing it?
I can't really speculate as to why. Well, okay, I can speculate.
You're a free person.
Sure, they just want to drag this out so that people forget about these videos and they can, but
they want to discredit David. I mean, that's their whole thing. It's like 6 months after David's videos came out, we did some polling with millennials. It was messed up because we asked them, what do you know about the videos? What did they know? They were fake. Yeah. They couldn't tell you anything else that happened. It was something about abortion and they were fake. I was like, how? But that's been their whole thing the whole time.
That's exactly right. They're trying to suppress this information. So the reactions, obviously in court you have to be really quiet, but we're all looking at the judge. It's the judge's reaction. And he had quite a few follow-up questions specifically for some of the defendants, or I'm sorry, not the defendants, but those who were testifying, which I don't know a lot about how these types of things work, but it seems weird when the prosecution isn't really asking any questions and the judge is asking to get clarification on very simple things.
The prosecution asked David questions?
They did a little bit, but not very much. The question that they started out with was something like to the effect of, oh, so you did all this by lying? And David had a very clever answer. He said something about, there's a lot of different philosophies when it comes to lying about something like this, but I wouldn't really consider investigative journalism to be lying. And you could tell the judge was kind of like, okay, like it was just, she asked very hyperbolic questions like she asked the abortionist, oh, so because he said, he made a really important and compelling point that I hadn't thought a lot about before this, but he said, there's a problem with consenting pregnant people to abortions before they've had the abortion because it creates a coercive effect. And so the prosecution said, oh, so you're saying that women are easily manipulated? And he said, actually, I believe I said patients. And then the judge asked him a few follow-up questions and then for a little clarification on that. And Dr. Smith said, if you're asking me if a pregnant woman is subject to manipulation, then I would say absolutely, you betcha, or something to that effect.
This is the abortionist
who
testified on behalf of the defense. Okay.
That's right. And he made it clear that often, very often in his practice, patients have changed their mind in between saying, I do want this abortion, and actually going through with it. And he explained that there is a strong coercive effect when they believe that they're going to be helping in some way or being able to donate the body of their fetus to medical research. And I just thought that is really profound. Like, it really can affect these women's health. And he spoke to the fact too that if you alter the procedure in any way based on the information that it is for medical research, not only is that against the law, but it is certainly putting the person at risk because they're in jeopardy of bleeding more and the procedure taking longer and putting them at more risk. So the entire process of Planned Parenthood's way of checking for signs of life, he said they're not checking for fetal heartbeat, only like breathing and moving, and that they're consenting beforehand and that the doctors aren't even doing their own consenting, that this is creating a huge incentive for born-alive infants to have their organs harvested for medical research. And then Dr. Terrisa Bukovinac, who you may know, she testified under oath that in order to
she helped mentor David and kind of prepare him for all of this.
Yes, she is an expert witness in terms of stem cell research. And she testified to the fact that beating hearts have to be taken from born alive infants. So those beating hearts that STEM Express testified under oath, the CEO testified under oath that they donated or sold, to Stanford, were certainly taken from born alive infants. So all of this information is now out, not on the public record quite yet.
But it will be.
But it will be. And Planned Parenthood did not Planned Parenthood, but the state and as we all know, they're bringing this on behalf of the abortion
Yeah.
industry, did absolutely nothing in my eyes to try to show in any way that, David's defense is that all of these were in public places. That excludes him from the law. And he was investigating violent felonies. We're talking
And
about
he
born-alive
reported,
infants.
and this is an important point too, he made that he actually went to the police
Yes.
and the authorities to report the illegal activity
Yes.
that he uncovered, just like other investigative journalists.
In several states
Yeah.
and in 2 departments in the state of California.
Notice no one took action until he went public, though.
That's right. That's right. And
So
that's
what
why
can
this
people do? So this is ongoing. We're going to hear a couple weeks if the judge is going to continue this case, this criminal case. You've got the civil case. What can normal pro-life people in Michigan do?
2 things. Share the videos and keep
CMP
talking about
videos.
them. Yes. And be an activist. Take up where David has left off. He has a lot of things to deal with right now, but we cannot end the investigative journalism with his work. This must continue. We cannot allow the abortion industry to create this scenario where we feel, where we are, don't feel like we can do this.
And I think that's important too. Well, getting back to sharing the videos, obviously I work with young people all the time, and even now I've got students who have leaders who are like, CMP, what are those videos? I'm like,
Yes.
David Daleiden, this is,
Yeah.
and so we've kind of forgotten about in our collective memory. It was only 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, but people are already forgetting. Oh,
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense. I mean, when you think about young kids, high school is only 4 years.
yeah, and they were in middle school or grade school when this was happening. So we have to continue. And I was challenging our team of we got to reshare these videos and keep trying to talk about this issue and keep it alive. Yes. I think another thing folks can do is be tweeting at the president, asking him where's your department? Where's your Department of Justice on this? They've been investigating this for years. We've heard nothing. Keep pushing the President Trump and his administration to follow through on this. Yeah. The other thing is pray for David and Sandra and their legal teams, because this takes an immense amount of courage to be able to do this. Okay, moving on. One bad thing. Number 2. You just went up and spoke at the UC Board of Regents meeting against live fetal tissue harvesting.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on? Explain it for everyone here.
Yeah. UCSF, the University of California in San Francisco.
Which we talked about before. They are the evil abortion university. All bad things come from UCSF,
yes. Especially when it comes to abortion.
Oh, yeah.
Their Ryan residency program is the top-rated abortion training program in the nation.
And they actually then export these abortionists to other medical schools because they're having this whole problem. They don't have enough, abortionists. So, yeah.
That's correct. And they run a global outreach through their program Answer. And Dr. Grossman, who, is so famously Twitter feuding with Lila and supporting ridiculous tyrannical bills like SB 24.
He's the abortion-loving doctor who Facebook said could do a non-biased fact check of Live Action's videos.
Yeah. So Dr. Grossman is just one of the few doctors at UCSF that is an establishment of doctors there. They're surrounded by yes men. They do abortions on one hand, and then for, parents who don't want their children, and then for ones that do at the same gestational age, they advocate for putting them in the NICU. So it's absolutely morbid, the things that they are
This is a
engaged in.
taxpayer-funded university,
That's
right?
correct. There's a lot of private funding that goes into this, but here's the bottom line.
I'm sure Warren Buffett's behind it too.
They've been funding it since the 1960s. Warren Buffett has. It's very, very connected to Warren Buffett. I'm glad you brought that up. But the bottom line is that in order to do fetal tissue research at these gestational ages, 18 to 24 weeks is kind of what they're looking at for.
And they're doing research on AIDS, right?
For this one particular project, yes, but they have several other projects going on. But the AIDS one, it gets a lot of publicity because Obviously,
No one wants anyone to die of AIDS.
exactly.
And that's what like, oh, you pro-lifers don't care about people suffering from AIDS.
That's right. But in order to do this research, they can only do abortions 2 ways. That they cannot use digoxin to cause the heart attack before they actually do the abortion, because it would compromise the tissue that they would use in medical research. So the only 2 ways they can do it is through a fully live dismemberment, 18 to 24 weeks.
When it's already been proven that the child can feel immense pain, we actually think the child can feel more pain because all the pain receptors aren't, they touch them here, they feel it all over.
That is horrifying. The second option is giving them a huge dose of misoprostol, doing a medical induction, having a born alive infant, and then harvesting those organs.
And this is happening in San Francisco.
Well, we can deduce that it's happening. It's very difficult, obviously, to get someone to come out and say, yes, this is happening.
I'm a monster and I dismember live babies, yeah.
But if you analyze the data, then yes, it's definitely happening. And that's everything that's happening there.
How did you find out about this?
It's just a matter of like watching some of David's videos and listening to some of the testimony in San Francisco court, understanding exactly how late-term abortions are done, and then realizing that the Ryan Residency is the top late-term abortion training capital of the U.S. And San Francisco, we know culture is driven from places like California and San Francisco across the globe. What progressive policies get put in place in cities like San Francisco, they trend everywhere. And we really believe that we know the statistics on our side, that the majority of Democrats and millennials have a problem with late-term elective abortion, and certainly under these circumstances, this is major common ground. And in a place like San Francisco, we think that we can really put a spotlight on the horrors of what's been allowed to happen here.
So we were funding some of this research, U.S. taxpayers, because the NIH had a contract, right, with UCSF on some of this AIDS research with using this live fetal tissue. NIH canceled it. But they're still on doing the research. They're just not using NIH money right now, National Institutes of Health money.
Correct. They do a ton of fetal tissue research at UCSF, so there's all kinds of private funding. We are grateful that the public funding has been cut, or that the NIH funding is no longer happening for this particular project, but we know NIH is still funding other projects across the country and possibly still at UCSF.
And that's bullshit, because we have a pro-life president, and this doesn't take an act of Congress to direct his own cabinet. NIH is funded through Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, to stop funding live fetal tissue research.
I think it's something like
action item.
extramural or intramural research.
Yeah.
So it is a small percentage that's still occurring, but we know it's still happening, and we definitely need more activists talking about this. This is low-hanging fruit. This is something that even pro-choicers can get involved with. So it's a great place to start if you're an activist anywhere in the nation.
So you
today.
just went to a public hearing that the UC school system, the Board of Regents, was having to say, like, you're against this.
Yeah.
What else are you trying to do to kind of stop this and kind of put an end to what UCSF is doing?
Well, we're hoping to make this a talking point in the upcoming election. We want people in Congress to be talking about this, to be tweeting about it. We want to make this a talking point on the local level, and just really have this perspective represented by young people, by people from across the political and ideological spectrum, to bring about real change in the one place where we know it's going to have the greatest effect.
Well, I'm really glad you're there in San Francisco and you guys are leading the charge there. I think you're definitely called by God to do what you're doing. You're living out your calling, but I mean, we have to be in California. We have to be. I think sometimes there's like this feeling amongst conservatives or pro-lifers of kind of circle the wagons and be around like-minded people, and like, why would you ever be in California? Like, pro-lifers should pull all their money out. I'm like, no, this is where it happens. And we know, just like with no-fault divorce and abortion, both of those things originated out of the state of California. What happens in California does not stay, unfortunately, in California. Californians don't even stay, unfortunately, in California. We could change a lot of policies of states like Arizona, Texas, and Colorado if Californians would just stay in California and quit exporting their bad policies. But whatever. Bankrupt your state and move to another state and pass bad laws. But we have to be here because this is where cultures form. And this is why we go on college campuses. This is why we have so many staff members here. We actually have more Students for Life groups in the state of California than any other state. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. It's a huge state, but people are always like shocked by that. I'm like, of course we would be active in California. Some of our best student leaders come from Washington State and Oregon, some of the toughest places. So thanks for doing what you're doing. Thanks for giving us the update today. You can stay up to date about David's case and even this live tissue research that UCSF's doing on Students for Life's blog. We've been writing about it. You're going to be testifying in Congress, hopefully. So you're going to be hearing more about Terrisa and her work. And hopefully now you kind of have a little primer so you feel more comfortable talking about David Daleiden, CMP, everything that's going on. Continue to follow this. Continue to tweet, Facebook posts, share the videos, get active. And honestly, we're not asking you to do a lot besides just talk about it and keep this issue going. So thanks for tuning in this week to Explicitly Pro-Life, and we'll see you next week.